The world will spin with or without your worry, but your soul will not sing without your attention. Self-attention is not selfishness, but sacred necessity. In a world that constantly demands more of us, more time, more energy, more agreement, more performance, it becomes easy to forget that we are not infinite wells. We are not bottomless cups. We are vessels with limits, hearts with thresholds, souls that long for stillness even in the midst of chaos. Yet somehow we have been taught that to turn our gaze inward is a betrayal, that to prioritize our own well-being is to neglect the needs of others. But I tell you now, that is not truth. That is tradition dressed in shame, and we were not born to carry shame. There is a quiet power in paying attention to yourself. It is not loud, not boastful, not flashing for approval. It does not need applause. It simply is. Like a tree that does not beg the sky for sunlight, it stands rooted, certain in its need. Likewise, when you begin to attend to your own inner world, you begin to grow in ways you didn't know you were allowed to. You begin to soften where you've been hardened and strengthen where you've been worn thin. You begin to remember what you forgot while being everything for everyone else. Self-attention is the practice of listening to the still, small voice within, the one that whispers your name, not as the world calls it, but as your spirit recognizes it. That voice is not in competition with the voices of others. It is not louder, but it is wiser. It is not always comfortable, but it is always honest. And when you honor that voice, you honor the sacredness of your existence. People will call it selfish because they do not understand what it means to live from a place of fullness. They have mistaken depletion for dedication. But you cannot pour clean water from a rusted vessel. You cannot give your best if you have given yourself away entirely. And love given at the expense of self-respect is not love. It is martyrdom. When you focus on yourself truly and compassionately, you begin to see the difference between self-centeredness and self-regard. The former demands the world revolve around you. The latter says, I revolve around my own center, and that center must be well, that center must be whole. Otherwise, everything orbiting it spins into chaos. To pay attention to yourself is to take inventory of your needs, your pains, your joys, and your boundaries. It is asking yourself, what do I need today to be well? It is letting your yes be true and your no be clear. It is choosing rest without guilt. It is making space to breathe, to cry, to celebrate, to grieve, to be. Self-attention is not a spa day. It is not a temporary escape. It is a daily returning to yourself with gentleness, as you would return to a child who needs holding. You begin to realize that your worth is not tied to your productivity, nor your goodness to your sacrifice. You begin to feel yourself slowly, beautifully, unraveling the expectations that were wrapped around you like chains. You begin to rise, not above others, but within yourself. You begin to understand that you are not here to disappear in service of someone else's story. You are here to live yours. And when you live from that place of wholeness, of truth, of self-regard, you give better, you love better, you lead better. You do not serve from emptiness, but from overflow. Your boundaries become not walls, but bridges that help others understand how to reach you, how to meet you, how to treat you. You stop apologizing for your needs. You stop shrinking to be digestible. You stop asking for permission to take up the space you were born to fill. There is sacredness in this shift, sacredness in waking up each day and deciding that your wellness matters, sacredness in feeding your soul before feeding into drama, sacredness in walking away from what drains you without offering explanation, because peace is not a luxury. Peace is the soil in which everything beautiful grows. So don't let the world convince you that self-attention is selfishness. That narrative was born from control, from systems that survive on your exhaustion. But you, my dear, were not made to be constantly tired, constantly pleasing, constantly proving. You were made to be whole. And wholeness begins when you look inward and say, I am worth my own attention. It is not an act of ego, it is an act of devotion. You are not turning away from the world, you are turning toward yourself so that when you return to the world, you do so rooted, ready, real. You do so in fullness, not fragments. You are your own sacred task. Give yourself the care you keep giving away. Everything else will find its place. Boundaries as a form of self-respect is a truth we often learn late, often painfully, after we've been stretched too thin, spoken over, taken for granted, or quietly diminished in spaces we thought were safe. But boundaries are not walls meant to keep people out. They are doors and fences, clear signs that say, here is where I begin, and here is where I end. They are not punishments. They are invitations for respect. They teach others how to love us without harming us, how to honor our presence without assuming our obedience. Many of us grew up believing that kindness meant always saying yes, that love meant enduring discomfort, and that being good meant being available at all times. We were praised for being agreeable, applauded for being selfless, and encouraged to keep the peace, even if it cost our sense of self. And so we learned to make ourselves smaller, quieter, easier to carry for others, even if it meant carrying the burden of our own silence. But real respect, real love, real kindness cannot thrive without boundaries. To live without them is to give others unrestricted access to your time, your energy, your emotions, your body, your spirit. And over time, you begin to erode, not all at once, but slowly, steadily. You lose pieces of yourself trying to please people who never asked you who you truly were. You become a mirror, always reflecting others, never seen in your own light. Boundaries are the brave act of reclaiming your selfhood. They are the language of dignity. When you say, no, I cannot do that, or that doesn't work for me, you are not being difficult. You are being clear. When you say, I need time, or that behavior is not okay, you are not pushing people away. You are making room for the right people to stay. It takes courage to set boundaries, especially in relationships where your lack of them has been the foundation. Some people will resist. Some will accuse you of changing. Some will say you're selfish or cold. But that resistance is not a reflection of your wrongness. It is a measure of how much they benefited from your silence. You must remember that you are not responsible for someone else's comfort at the expense of your own clarity. You do not owe access to people who refuse to honor your humanity. Setting boundaries is not about control, it's about consent. It's about deciding how much of yourself you are willing to give and under what circumstances. It is not unloving to say, I will not engage in that argument. It is not rude to say, I need rest. It is not cruel to remove yourself from spaces that leave you feeling small, unsafe, or unseen. These are acts of self-respect. And when you begin to live by that respect, you find that your energy begins to return. Your voice grows stronger and your path becomes clearer. What's more, boundaries don't just protect you, they teach others how to rise. When you hold yourself with integrity, you invite others to do the same. You show people that it is possible to love deeply without losing yourself. You model what it means to take responsibility for your own well-being. You give permission for others to do the same. And those who are meant for you, those who truly love you, who value your essence, not just your usefulness, will not leave when you set boundaries. They will adjust, they will grow, they will meet you where you stand, not where they can bend you. You begin to understand that peace is not the absence of conflict, but the presence of clarity. And clarity comes when you know where you end and someone else begins, when you no longer feel guilty for protecting your own space, when you no longer apologize for valuing your own time, when you stop explaining the legitimacy of your no. Boundaries are not just for moments of crisis. They are for everyday living. They are in the small decisions, choosing not to answer a call when you are tired, deciding not to overcommit your schedule, ending a conversation that feels depleting, declining invitations that feel more like obligations. These small acts add up. They become the architecture of a life built on respect. In the end, boundaries are not a rejection of others. They are an affirmation of yourself. They are the shape your love takes when it includes you too. When you draw those lines with grace and firmness, you begin to see who is willing to meet you at your worth, not just your willingness. You begin to feel safe in your own skin, and that is not just self-respect, it is freedom. The importance of inner kindness cannot be overstated, though it is often overlooked in a world that constantly measures our value by external achievements. We are taught from a young age how to treat others, be polite, be generous, be considerate, but rarely are we taught how to treat ourselves with the same compassion. Instead, many of us grow up with an inner voice shaped by criticism, comparison, and impossible expectations. That voice becomes the soundtrack of our days, whispering doubt when we try, shame when we rest, and judgment when we fall short. And over time, we begin to believe it. We mistake that inner harshness for truth, and we let it shape our sense of self. But inner kindness is not weakness. It is not laziness, indulgence, or denial. Inner kindness is strength. It is the courage to offer yourself the same grace you extend to others. It is the decision to become a safe place for your own heart to land, especially on the days when you feel broken, uncertain, or afraid. When you choose to speak gently to yourself, to encourage rather than criticize, to nurture rather than punish, you begin to change not just your mood, but your entire way of being. So much of our suffering does not come from what happens to us, but from the way we speak to ourselves about what happens. We fail a test, and we tell ourselves we're stupid. We get rejected, and we convince ourselves we're unworthy. We make a mistake, and we call ourselves failures. But what if, in those moments, we responded as we would to a dear friend? What if we said, "You're human, you're learning, you're still worthy"? What if we reminded ourselves that falling down is part of the journey, not evidence that we should stop walking? When we are kind to ourselves, we create space for growth. We allow ourselves to learn without fear of ridicule. We allow ourselves to rest without feeling guilt. We begin to understand that perfection is not the goal. Wholeness is. And wholeness includes flaws, missteps, doubts, and delays. Inner kindness is not pretending everything is okay. It is acknowledging when things are hard and choosing not to abandon yourself in those moments. It is staying close to your own heart when the world feels cold or chaotic. It is learning to hold yourself with tenderness instead of tension. And the truth is, how we speak to ourselves becomes how we move through the world. A harsh inner critic leads to insecurity, comparison, resentment. A kind inner voice fosters confidence, patience, and presence. The way you treat yourself sets the tone for every relationship in your life. If you constantly berate yourself, you will tolerate voices outside of you that do the same. If you never allow yourself rest, you will attach your worth to constant doing, constant proving. But if you learn to befriend yourself, to stand in your own presence and say, "I am enough," then you begin to live with a sense of groundedness that no praise or criticism can shake. Inner kindness is a daily practice. It's in the words you use when you look in the mirror. It's in how you respond to your own tiredness, your own fear, your own imperfections. It's in the choice to pause and breathe instead of pushing through with clenched fists and closed hearts. It's in forgiving yourself for what you didn't know then, for what you're still figuring out now. And it's not always easy. Some days, being kind to yourself feels unnatural, even impossible. On those days, it's important to remember that kindness is not a feeling. It is a decision. You don't have to feel worthy to speak gently to yourself. You just have to choose not to harm yourself with your own words. That choice, repeated over time, reshapes your inner world. Kindness is not just about softness, it's about resilience. When you are kind to yourself, you recover faster from disappointment. You bounce back with more grace. You navigate difficulty with more inner stability, and you become a better companion to others, not because you are perfect, but because you are present, grounded, and real. Ultimately, inner kindness is an act of liberation. It is breaking the cycle of self-punishment passed down through generations, systems, and institutions. It is choosing to love the parts of you that no one else sees. It is finding beauty not in being flawless, but in being fully alive. When you give yourself kindness, you step into your own power, not the kind that dominates, but the kind that endures, heals, and elevates. It is this kind of power that allows you to show up in the world not just as someone who survives, but as someone who thrives. Solitude as a teacher is a lesson most often understood in stillness, not in noise. It is in those quiet hours when the world stops demanding, when there is no one to impress, no role to perform, no conversation to maintain, that we begin to hear the subtle truths hiding beneath the surface of our everyday lives. In solitude, we are stripped of distraction. We meet ourselves without armor. There is no applause to chase, no audience to entertain, only the raw presence of who we are when no one else is watching. At first, solitude can feel uncomfortable, even unbearable. We are so used to filling every moment with sound and stimulation that silence seems unnatural. But that discomfort is not a sign to flee. It is an invitation to stay, because beneath the discomfort is clarity. Solitude has a way of pulling the truth to the surface. It removes the noise, the influence, the expectations of others, and reveals what has been waiting inside of us all along. When we spend time alone, not in loneliness, but in intentional quiet, we begin to understand the difference between what is ours and what we've inherited. The dreams we thought were ours, the opinions we were taught to hold, the narratives we've been told about who we should be, all of it begins to dissolve. In its place emerges something more real, more rooted. Solitude doesn't give us answers. It gives us the right questions. And once we begin to ask those questions, we can no longer settle for surface-level living. Solitude teaches patience. In a world that demands instant gratification, it slows us down and reminds us that becoming is a slow unfolding. You cannot rush self-awareness. You cannot force insight. You have to sit with the silence long enough for it to begin speaking. And when it does, you'll find it says things you might not want to hear, but deeply need to. Things like, you're not happy in that relationship, or you're chasing a life that isn't truly yours. Solitude doesn't lie, it doesn't flatter, it mirrors gently but relentlessly. It also teaches you to be your own companion, to enjoy your own company, to know that your presence is enough even when no one else is around to validate it. That is a powerful kind of self-love, not the loud, performative kind, but the quiet knowing that you are worthy of your own time, your own attention, your own care. When you are comfortable in solitude, you stop fearing your own thoughts. You stop needing constant validation from outside sources. You stop molding yourself to fit into spaces that were never made for you. And contrary to what some believe, solitude doesn't disconnect you from others. It deepens your connection. When you return from solitude, you carry yourself differently. You speak with more intention. You listen with more presence. You love with more depth, because your love is no longer coming from a place of need. It's coming from a place of fullness. People who have made peace with solitude are often the most grounded, the most compassionate, because they are not operating from fear of being alone. They are not trying to extract worth from other people. They are simply sharing what they have already found within themselves. Solitude also fuels creativity. Some of the greatest works of art, music, literature, and innovation were born in solitude. When you are alone, your imagination has room to stretch. Your ideas are not interrupted by opinions or trends. You create from a place of authenticity, not imitation. Solitude opens the door to original thought, to deep reflection, to spiritual insight. It is the space where the soul breathes, where the heart speaks without censorship, and where the mind explores without fear of judgment. But it is important to distinguish solitude from isolation. Isolation is rooted in fear, in avoidance, in pain. Solitude is rooted in choice, in reflection, in growth. Isolation closes you off from life. Solitude opens you to yourself. It is not about avoiding others. It is about returning to them more whole, more centered, more real. There is something sacred about learning how to be alone and not feel lacking, to walk through a park by yourself and feel joy, to sit at a cafe with your thoughts and not feel the need to escape them, to travel inward and not feel lost. That kind of inner stability is not something the world gives you. It is something you cultivate in solitude. So much wisdom lives inside of us, buried under layers of distraction and noise. Solitude is the tool that uncovers it. It reminds us that we are not just participants in life, we are also observers, reflectors, creators. It calls us to slow down, to pay attention, to remember what truly matters. And in doing so, it becomes one of the most powerful teachers we will ever know. Not through lessons shouted from a stage, but through whispers spoken in silence, echoing through the chambers of our own soul. Healing is a process, not a performance. It is not a straight line, not a polished presentation, not a highlight reel of breakthroughs and victories. Healing is often quiet, messy, uncomfortable, and unseen. It is full of setbacks, relapses, moments of doubt, and days when it feels like nothing is changing at all. But that is the nature of true healing. It does not unfold to impress others. It unfolds to restore you. It is not meant to be put on display. It is meant to be lived, felt, and experienced deeply within. In a world driven by appearances, it's easy to feel pressure to look healed, even when we are still in pain. There is a subtle but dangerous expectation that once we speak our truth or ask for help, the rest should be quick and clean. But healing is not a switch you flip. It's a long, often confusing walk through the terrain of your own story. And sometimes that story is heavy. Sometimes it takes time to untangle what's been tightly wound inside of you. Sometimes you need to rest more than you need to progress. And that's okay. The problem arises when we start treating healing like a show we're obligated to perform, smiling when we're still grieving, pretending we've moved on when we're still in mourning, using affirmations to mask pain instead of facing it. We feel the need to convince others and ourselves that we are okay because we've shared our story, or because time has passed, or because we've started a new chapter. But healing doesn't work like that. The truth is, just because you've acknowledged your pain doesn't mean you've healed from it. Just because you've forgiven someone doesn't mean the wound is closed. Healing takes repetition. It takes revisiting the same emotions over and over until they no longer control you. It takes sitting with discomfort without rushing to escape it. And sometimes healing doesn't look like transformation. Sometimes it just looks like survival. Getting out of bed, answering a message, saying no when your whole life you were conditioned to say yes. These small victories don't make for captivating stories, but they are profound milestones. Healing is not always about becoming someone new. Sometimes it's about remembering who you were before the hurt and returning to that person with gentleness. There will be days when you feel like you've made it through, and others when it feels like you're back at the beginning. That doesn't mean you're failing, that means you're human. Healing comes in waves. Some days it will wash over you with peace. Other days it will crash hard and demand your attention. But every wave is part of the tide pulling you closer to wholeness. You may not see the progress day to day, but over time, you'll look back and realize how far you've come. Not because you performed healing perfectly, but because you stayed with it honestly. We must also understand that healing cannot be rushed. There's no deadline for being okay, no timer that goes off and declares, "You should be over this by now." That kind of thinking only adds shame to pain. Real healing honors your unique pace. It listens to your needs, not your calendar. It allows you to go back and revisit old wounds when they resurface without guilt or embarrassment. It allows you to cry over something that happened years ago and still consider that part of the process. Because healing doesn't expire, and it doesn't always look strong. Sometimes it looks like falling apart, like asking for help, like stepping away from relationships or environments that trigger your trauma, even if others don't understand. Healing often requires you to let go of people who were comfortable with your brokenness but are threatened by your growth. It requires you to speak truths you were taught to hide, to break patterns you were praised for. That takes bravery, not because it's grand, but because it's real. There is power in giving yourself permission to heal privately, to not document every step, to not make your pain content, to not feel obligated to explain your process to people who haven't earned the right to witness it. You don't owe the world your pain, your progress, or your peace. You owe yourself the space to become whole again, however long that takes and however quietly it unfolds. Healing is personal. It's not one size fits all. What works for someone else may not work for you. Your timeline, your tools, your turning points, they are yours. And that uniqueness should be honored, not questioned. The journey is not about perfection. It's about showing up for yourself day after day, even when the progress is invisible. It's about learning to live with the parts of you that once hurt and finding meaning in your scars without needing them to disappear. So let go of the need to look healed. Let go of the pressure to prove you're okay. You don't need to smile for the sake of appearances. You don't need to minimize what you feel to make others comfortable. Your healing is valid, even on the days it's silent, even on the days it's slow, even on the days it doesn't look like anything at all. Keep going gently. Healing is not a show. It's a return to self, and that is sacred. Transformation comes from within, not from the external accolades, approval, or appearances we often chase. It is born in silence, nurtured in solitude, and revealed not through spectacle, but through slow, steady becoming. True transformation is not something that others can give us, nor is it something we can borrow or imitate. It is a deeply personal unfolding, an internal shift that changes how we see ourselves, how we engage with the world, and how we carry our stories. The world often measures transformation by visible outcomes: a new job, a weight loss, a relationship status, a shiny success story wrapped in accomplishment. But these are not the soul of transformation. They are the byproducts, the echoes. The real work happens long before the visible changes. It happens in the invisible moments, when you confront your own patterns, when you sit with discomfort rather than escape it, when you choose honesty over hiding, when you learn to trust yourself after years of doubt. It begins when something inside you decides it can no longer live by the old script. Maybe it's triggered by pain, loss, betrayal, or a deep sense of emptiness. Maybe it's a quiet restlessness that says, this life, this way of being, no longer fits who I truly am. That moment is not loud. It doesn't arrive with applause. It arrives in the silence of your own truth, and it's there that the seed of transformation is planted. This kind of growth cannot be forced. It cannot be rushed. You cannot skip to the ending without walking through the middle, the messy, uncertain, often painful middle, where the old self is dismantled and the new self is still taking shape. And that middle part, the part no one likes to talk about, is where the real transformation occurs. It's where you sit with the habits you no longer want but still feel drawn to. It's where you face the voices that tell you you're not enough. It's where you resist the urge to numb, to run, to blame, and instead choose to stay with yourself, to witness your own becoming. Transformation is not a one-time event. It's a series of choices made over and over again. It's choosing to respond with patience when you used to react with anger. It's choosing to set boundaries where you once allowed yourself to be drained. It's choosing to believe in your worth, not because someone told you, but because you finally felt it to be true in your bones. These changes may be invisible to others, but they are revolutionary to your spirit. And because transformation is internal, it cannot be measured by someone else's timeline. You may not change as quickly as others expect. You may outgrow relationships or environments that once felt like home. You may find yourself misunderstood, even criticized, by those who only knew the older version of you. That is part of the process. Not everyone will come with you into the new season of your life. Not everyone will understand your journey, but you are not here to convince others. You are here to live in alignment with your truth. One of the most beautiful aspects of transformation is that it is never wasted. Every tear, every struggle, every night you questioned everything served a purpose. Nothing inside you breaks without offering space to be rebuilt. The cracks let in light. The falling apart makes room for the reassembling. And over time, you begin to see that your transformation was not about becoming someone else. It was about returning to who you've always been beneath the layers of fear, conditioning, and performance. From within is where your resilience is born. It's where your voice finds clarity. It's where your peace lives, not because life is perfect, but because you've learned how to anchor yourself in the storm. It's where your strength is cultivated, not the strength to endure more pain, but the strength to choose differently, to love differently, to live differently. And while others may witness your transformation and call it sudden, you will know the truth. You will remember the nights you wrestled with doubt. You will remember the days you chose growth over comfort. You will remember the moments when no one was watching, but you still decided to show up for yourself. That is what defines transformation. Not what the world sees, but what you know within. There is no final destination to this journey. Transformation is ongoing. It does not end once you've healed a wound or crossed a milestone. It continues as long as you continue to evolve, to question, to listen inward. It is a lifelong dance between becoming and remembering, shedding and revealing, grounding and expanding. And every step of it is sacred because it brings you closer to the most authentic expression of who you are. The transformation you seek is not out there. It has always been within you, waiting for the moment you finally turn inward and say, I am ready. You